love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A, everybody. Good to have you here. This is the time we do 3 shows a week, one today at this time, one tomorrow, and then a Good News Fellowship the next day. I've started a little bit late, which I've been doing lately. I apologize for that. My special guest today is Samuel Branster. How are you, Samuel?
I'm fantastic. Thanks, Peter.
Mate, it's good to have you on the show, and we're going to be talking about traditional Adventist views, and also this concept that I've been floating for a while now, that there are two churches in one. Perhaps, maybe I'm wrong, but I do know that whenever I talk about it, I get a lot of support from the traditional Adventists and a lot of pushback from my previous tribe, the liberal progressive Adventists, who say I'm attacking the church. So I'm keen to say right off the bat, no, I'm not actually attacking the church. I just feel like there is something to see here. There's something going on between two theologies in the church that are constantly opposed. And just for a bit of background before I hand it over to Samuel to share his thoughts on this, and Samuel, you know this, you and I have lived around the area. Your father, Carl Branster, that's right, isn't it? He and I were friends back in the day. He was very much involved with the Adventist Media Center and doing all sorts of creative things with film and technology, and very creative person. And he's passed that on to you as well. So I had a lot of time and respect for Carl. And so, you and I know each other. And there was a time where you and I probably would have sat down after a church service and gone head to head, not in a mean, disrespectful way, but I would have said, no, Samuel, what you're trying to teach is wrong. And you would have said, no, what you're trying to teach is wrong. But I did notice that when I traveled around as a musician for 30 years in the Adventist church, I would check out which church I was playing at in that town, because there were always two. There was one that was more traditional and one that was more liberal progressive. Here's my point. I would tailor my music to fit the congregation. For the traditional, it was more hymns, mellow. For the liberal progressives, it was more contemporary. But the point is, it's not about the standards or the style of music, more contemporary, less contemporary. That's just such a surface level for people to think on this at. What I knew early on was that there were two theologies in those two churches. Not just, hey, we want happy clappy, tree hugging, contemporary music, or hey, we only want hymns. No, if people think that that's what I'm talking about, they are mistaken. I noticed early on that, over 30 years ago, that there were two theologies within Adventism. The more traditional Adventist is very aware of that, and they see the new theology as a big threat. They see this new theology largely symbolized or spearheaded, they believe, by Des Ford, and he became the kind of the scapegoat or the lightning rod for the new theological movement in many ways. But when I talk to the more liberal progressive Adventists, they go, no, we are inclusive. We are a big tent. Our Adventism is as broad and wide as every individual Adventist's unique belief is. And I get that, but there's something here that's different to a normal, we've got Anglican churches over here, high church, low church. One's a little bit more conservative, one's a little bit more contemporary, but the theology's broadly the same. We have something different here that needs to be addressed, because I'm guessing between 40 and 60% of young people are leaving the Adventist church. That's just the young people. There's something like 50-50 apostasy rate of all ages. And yes, people are leaving, Protestant movements in droves. Yep. But Adventists have a unique battle going on where these two theologies are not getting on. And so I want people to talk about it. And get this, Samuel, when I was an Adventist and I'd go to these churches and sing, and I'd have Sabbath lunch, or we'd be billeted out somewhere. The liberal progressives very clearly knew that they were different and separate. It's only that I've, since leaving the church, that they don't like me saying that. I think,
Mm.
you know why? I think it's because they think I'm calling them out for being a little bit secretive, for being a little bit kind of behind the scenes. Oh, we've got lots of changes going on, and they try and change things on committees and whatnot. And I don't think they like being called out. I also think they don't like having their beliefs shaken. They're so used to no one really challenging them. There's kind of a, I don't mean to be mean, but there's a bit of a higher moral ground vibe that sometimes they emit, and I did too. So here we are. We've got this situation that I believe is there within the church. I'm going to play a video in a moment that talks a little, it goes for 5 minutes. It talks a little bit about where the split for this current tension was. And we'll unpack more. But just before I play the clip, just share with me your thoughts on what I've just said there. Am I barking up the wrong tree? Do I have a leg to stand on? Is there nothing to see here? And the Adventists who say, hey, that's not my Adventism, are right, and I should just keep my mouth closed.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your experience. From what I see, I think you're spot on. I think that there is two distinct groups in the church, and there's probably more. There's probably, you know, each side probably has their own, nuances and qualifications for certain
Yes.
teachings and things like that. However, it does boil down to, yeah, you can separate them into two clear groups if people were honest about what they believed. And I sort of look at it as who upholds the fundamentals and the pillars of, Adventism when it was established and who doesn't.
Yes.
And I think if you separate them into those two groups, it's quite clear that there is two.
Yeah.
And I would like for people to discuss it and the conversation to be out there. But from what you said so far, yes, 100% agree. And I am definitely on board with having a conversation because I think both need to talk to each other because I
Yeah.
think we've lost that ability, and
Yeah.
that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I agree, and well said. I drew a little chart that I've been showing the last couple of weeks leading up to this conversation, where, because I agree with you, there are, it's ridiculous to say, hey, there's only two groups. Of course, it's more nuanced than that, but generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking, there are
Mm-hmm.
two unique theologies.
Mm-hmm.
And I've divided into a cluster of four in my little flow chart here. There's the leadership at the
Yeah,
top.
over
And
both.
they're a
Yeah.
whole other thing, and we
Mm-hmm.
know we've got the GC going on right now. We've got a
Mm-hmm.
new president, Erton Kohler,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much to be said on this group of people, and tomorrow I'm doing another commentary look at the GC. Rodrigo Custodio and a few others will be joining me, and we will be discussing, is Erton much different to Ted Wilson? But one thing I've noticed, the liberal progressives are all, hey, let's give him a go, and of course, hey, it's a breath of fresh air. And I'm thinking, the reality is that he's just perhaps a more even aggressive kind of Ted Wilson, but with maybe a more pleasant ability to be more diplomatic. I don't know, but it's constantly amazes me, the progressive liberals have so much hope, and they really believe that this church is going to change, that it's going to progress from its traditional pillars to something else. But Adventism can't do that because its traditional pillars are so important for the last day message of the imminent return, sharing a unique message. That unique message can't be changed or watered down. So this kind of hope they keep, hanging out there, I think is a false hope. Underneath the leadership, I'm calling it traditional Adventism and progressive Adventism. And we've got, of course, the traditionalist is more about Ellen White as the spirit of prophecy, the remnant church, these pillars that we've talked about. And then the progressives are more revisionist, big tent. Hey, that's not my Adventism. We can just be inclusive and welcome everybody. And I was interviewing Larry Geraghty, who I only found out the other day was very instrumental in the writing up of the 27 Fundamentals in the early 1980, and knowing his theology was more new theology. That explains why the 27 Fundamentals are quite watered down. No offense, but if you read that, yeah, they're easily accepted. And in the middle, we've got people who say, "Oh, Pete, what are you banging on about?" They're the cultural Adventists, and good on them. They don't want to get involved with that. They love their local church, they love community, they love haystacks, and that's great. It's a very viable thing to say. I'm not wanting to get involved with this discussion. The people that are the progressive Adventists who tell me behind the scenes that things are changing and that they're really down on the traditional, how crazy are those guys believing this, this, and this, they're the ones I'm speaking to. They're the ones I'm wanting to come out and have an open conversation. But I'm also wanting people from your side to come out and have a conversation as well, because I think everyone's trying to just please each other and not claim boldly their version of their faith. Blair Lemke, to me, a few years ago, I don't know if he's still doing this, but he was very much claiming his more traditional roots. And he and I would go at loggerheads if we were going to discuss our beliefs. But I truly respect what he was doing, and perhaps is doing, because he is saying, no, my Adventism is this, and it reflects my belief in the pillars of the Adventist church, which are sharing a unique theology and a unique message for the end of time, for the whole world. And let's face it, if you're going to question Ellen White's view of the investigative judgment, which she sanctioned with visions, if you question that belief, you are questioning her very God told me this. And where does that put you? That undermines the authority of Ellen White. You cannot be an Adventist and undermine the authority of Ellen White. You can see her as normal, flawed, human individual. Sure, that's fine. In so many areas, that's fine. She can be wrong. She could have misinterpreted this or that. But you cannot misinterpret the unique sanctuary investigative doctrine of the Adventist church given to her, she's claiming, by God. You do away with that and it's over for Adventists. Like it no longer has an important message. It's just another Protestant movement. Okay, so I'm just going to play this clip in the background here. We'll listen to it. It is a YouTube clip, so I'm hoping ads don't pop up. But it's just the audio playing. It's Russell and Colin Standish, and they were so powerful in getting behind the Concerned Brethren, in getting networking, in trying to reclaim their Adventism. And you can hear in their wording that they saw this as a threat. They saw Des Ford as being guided by the devil, even. So they see this as a unique threat. So let's play that, and then I'm going to open it up to you to share your thoughts in more detail. Let's see if this works. Yeah, it's. I may. I may have to, because for some reason the audio is not working there. I'll just see if, because it's audio only, I'll just see if you can hear this.
And get his PhD under that
Plymouth
Brethren theologian at Manchester. So he learned all the errors of once saved, always saved.
Talk about
he
Ford.
Came back doubly cursed with his second PhD. and he just destroyed the faith of generation after generation. It was Pastor Burnside who thumbed him and pointed to him. I'll stop at that point because there's much more to be said on how Ford was used of the devil to seed evil theology, not just at Avondale, but at foolish Pacific Union College, that took him on board as a professor there in the late 1970s.
Now, Colin, I think you want to discuss a little bit of how Brinsmead fitted into this apostasy.
Well, of course, all of us were contemporaries. Ford, Brinsmead. I first met Robert Brinsmead when I was a 19-year-old teaching on the far north coast of New South Wales, when there was a big youth series of meetings and camp meeting. And there I met Robert Brinsmead for the first time. He's actually a couple of months older than we are, so we're very
This
close
is Russell
in age.
and Colin Standish, for
And
those asking.
I must admit, I didn't take to him very well. And there was reasons why I didn't take to him, bad reasons why I didn't take to him. Both of us were highly competitive. And he loved table tennis. I loved table tennis. And however, I'd had a lot more experience than he had because he came from a little remote part of the country.
I'm actually going to not play it because I remembered he starts going on a tangent about table tennis and it takes a while to get back. But I wanted you to hear their voices. This is Russell and Colin Standish, who were part of the Concerned Brethren, who in the 70s wrote to the division office here in Australia and expressed their concern about this new theology. And you can just tell in their voice. And if people are keen to find that one, I'm happy to share a link. There's a 5-part series where they talk with Herb Douglas about this. And essentially, they are referring to the book Questions on Doctrine that came out in the late 50s that was trying to make Adventism evangelical and big tent inclusive. And hey, we're just like every other Protestant movement, except we worship on Sabbath. But Colin and Russell go to point out there that not only did that book try to appease the larger evangelical church body, they changed the nature of Christ, the teaching of the nature of Christ that Adventists had previously taught. They changed the atonement at the cross as previously taught. They changed the perspective of the judgment as previously taught. And there's about 7 or 8 things that were changed in that book that changed the theology, not the standards, not the pendulum swing that everyone talks about, going liberal to progressive to conservative, back and forth. No, these two churches have their own little pendulum swings within them. So that kind of book created the fertile soil for Heppenstall and for Des Ford and these guys who then began teaching that at Pacific Union, I think, and at Avondale and whatnot. And so these two brothers were really in their 40s, I think, when that letter was signed. The Concerned Brethren were all pretty much in their 60s, 70s at the time. Well, aren't you related to one of the Concerned Brethren? I vaguely remember.
I know that my grandfather used to get some of these speakers out to film them. This is obviously before I was born, or even when I was very young. So I didn't really get exposed to the Des Forward controversy until I came back to Adventism, and it's only from my own research that I sort of uncovered this whole controversy. I had no idea about it growing up in the church.
Yes, yeah. I'm pretty sure that one of your relatives did a lot to help promote the Concerned Brethren, and I might be wrong, but that's not the point.
I think my grandfather Carl, not my uncle Carl, but my grandfather Carl Brandster, I'm pretty sure that he facilitated some of these meetings and things like that from what I remember. And he used to do filming and things like that. So he used to film Dennis Priebe and
that's right,
stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure he was in that. You would consider my grandfather a CB. I know that's what my dad and probably uncles would call him a CB and things like that. So
for those of us in Australia, now
Yeah.
the Americans say, oh, this is just an Australian thing. No, no, no. The Standish brothers were evangelists for the Concerned Brethren. They had the energy. A lot of the Concerned Brethren were very wealthy. They were monetized, networked, focused. Off they went. The Standish brothers started Heartland in America. That's connected to Weimar or something. And I've traced every single conservative, fundamental, traditional, independent ministry person back to the Standish brothers. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, David Ashrick is a progressive. No, no, no. He goes straight back to the more conservative style. No matter anything you see that he does that's more progressive is just to do with standards, women's ordination, contemporary worship music, whatever. His core theology is still very traditional Adventist. So we have this landscape that here in Australia we could go, are you a Fordite or are you a CB? It was very black and white, the two groups. But the rest of the world did have that division very clearly, as we saw in Glacier View, and the leadership wanted to put an end to it and somehow draw a line under it, and they failed miserably. So to frame it that way, I think for the progressives who knew very well whether they were a CB or a Fordite because their jobs depended on it, for them to say to me recently, oh, no, 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 that's not true, there's nothing to see here, is disingenuous. So I want to bring you in with some of your thoughts. Tell us a little bit about your own personal journey, but share with us a little bit more about what you discovered about this new theology and how, as Ron Kelly said, it unravels Adventism. And why it's chalk and cheese.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the church, and from my previous comments, most people pick up that my parents, grandparents, and stuff were in the church, Adventist. But I, yeah, came to Adventist schools, went to all the churches every week, as most good Adventists do, and was usually like most of the kids, like that they're still doing now, the youth. They sort of see that there's no real, what's the point of all this? You know, why am I doing these things? I'm not sure what I believe, why I believe it, and they just sort of drift away and they go and do their own thing. I went into the hospitality industry when I finished school, so you know, the Sabbath was the peak time. So being a chef, I just started working on Sabbath and doing all these things. And it wasn't until I came back to the church later on in my life, studied my way back in after a number of events that happened. One key thing was my sister almost dying in Costa Rica, but she's got a whole testimony. But basically, that was a catalyst of a lot of my family members coming back to the church. And so I started studying the Bible and really just had a thirst for knowledge for the first time in my life. I just wanted to study everything. And I studied history and I studied things on evolution and creation and all this sort of stuff. And I just kept on unraveling all these things. And it wasn't until I got to probably in my late 20s that I started to uncover the history of the church, because I grew up in, probably, well, looking back on it now, a more conservative churches. And when I came back into the church later on, I started to see things going on at big camps and stuff like that. That I'm like, this this is something that never would have flown, like, you know, 15 years ago. And what happened? What's going on with the church that I left,
Yeah.
you know, 15 years ago? And so I started to uncover things, and that's when I started to get a little bit of the history on the Des Forward thing and the Standish brothers and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is sort of explaining some of these things that I can see, like clear, distinct theological differences between what, you know, I had studied myself into the church and started to study what the pioneers taught and things like that. And then now what is being taught in most churches were very different. And I'm like, these are two different messages.
Yes.
And so that's been my experience, and I have struggled to figure out the way around that and to figure out how we can talk about it, because I
Yeah.
think that even society in general, this is not just an Adventist problem. I think it's just a societal problem that people are very nervous, uh, I guess, avoid, do not want to talk to people that are have different views to them.
Yeah.
And they find it very difficult. They find it even triggering, emotionally charged a lot of the time, like it's a like you're at war. You
Yes.
know, as soon as you find that someone doesn't believe what you believe, oh, it's on. Like, I don't know what that is, what psychological thing that is, why we can't just sit down and talk about things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to be able to figure out how we can do that, and that's why I really appreciate what you're doing, Peter, because you're facilitating a conversation that I think is long overdue. It needs to happen. And my goal with my conversations with people is not just convince someone of this is what the truth is and this is what you need to believe. Mine is what the actual church and the pioneers used to teach. This is what the church
Yes.
taught, and I believe should teach now, and get clarity on that. I'm not
Yeah.
looking for conversions. I'm looking for clarity of what the church actually teaches. Because, like me, I came into the church and then I had to go digging to figure out what the historical Adventist traditional foundational pillars were. I had to do my own research on that. I had to
Mm.
do that and come to my conclusions that, oh yeah, I actually believe that that's what the Bible teaches. And not everyone is going to fall on that side, but
No.
I think we actually need to expose them of what the actual church teaches.
Yeah, that's
And I
right.
don't think that's happening.
No, no. Well, the source material, Ellen G. White, someone wrote to me this morning and said that they agree that I'm not barking up the wrong tree, but that even the traditional Adventist view has shifted and changed. And I agree
Mhm,
with that.
mhm,
But the traditional Adventist, what Adventism has taught since 1844 onwards, is way more in line with your beliefs and the traditional Adventists of today than it is with the progressive liberals.
mhm,
And so there's a milieu of people in the middle of this
mhm,
that don't really know what's going on. And thank you for saying that you appreciate what I'm doing, because I feel like I've been banging my head against a brick wall to both sides. And when I chatted to you a couple of weeks ago, you
mhm,
were like, yeah, I can see what you're saying. I'm going, wow, oh, what? That's good. And a lot of people do, and they tell me they do, and that's what's fueled me to keep going. But few people come onto the show and fully understand this. And imagine if the traditional Adventists, the original Adventists, were allowed to share their beliefs unfettered by the constant warring,
mhm,
how powerful your church ministry would be. Equally, imagine if the liberal progressives who have this new theology that don't believe in 1844, maybe as an analogy they do, or providentially they do,
mhm,
but most I speak to behind the scenes don't believe anything supernatural happened that night.
mhm,
Most don't believe in the 2,300 days.
mhm,
Um, and yet they say that they can still be an Adventist. Okay,
mhm.
sure, you can be a cultural Adventist, but I'm saying imagine how effective you could be if you were somehow defined and
Mhm,
networked and able to
mhm,
explore that unhindered
mhm.
by each other.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers, but
No.
I believe I can see a problem here
Yeah.
that I perhaps didn't see when I was an
Mhm,
Adventist. But when I was an
mhm,
Adventist,
mhm,
I enjoyed playing music for both sides very much
mhm,
so. I love hymns,
mhm,
I love
mhm,
contemporary music, but I was very aware that there were two theologies warring each other. And
mhm,
often after gigs that were of a more contemporary nature that I would do, I would be taken aside by the more traditional Adventists and lambasted. And so that would get my back up, and we'd go into these kind of
mhm,
fights. And there probably would have been a time where even you and I would have sat down and gone, "Oh, come on, look, you shouldn't be doing that, and this is unraveling the church," you would say to me, and then I'd push back. That kind of dialogue is not helpful. The kind of dialogue I'm trying to bring forward is, I think, going to at least clear the air a bit. And I'm hoping that there are progressive Adventists that will say, yeah, actually, we are in many ways trying to breathe a new theology into the church and jettison the pillars. That's really what they're trying to do, is jettison the pillars.
Yeah, I definitely think, though, that clarity is my goal. And I think that when you're in an organization, a body, you're evangelizing the world, you have an obligation to those people that you're inviting in to be part of your organization to be clear on what you believe and what you teach.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's happening a lot. Unfortunately, I think people are getting the bait and the switch. We're like, yeah, we're just like every other Christian church out there. And then they come in, they're like, what's all this Ellen White stuff? I never got taught about that. What's all this Pillars of 1844 and, being out, having to go through the time of trouble with Christ finishing his heavenly ministry in the sanctuary. Like, what's all this? I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
And you have to go digging to find that. Yet that's what the church was founded on.
Yeah.
And I think that you're being dishonest
Yes.
by expecting people to tithe to that
Yeah.
and support that establishment when you're not clear with them. I think it's just
Yes.
I don't think it's right. And I
No.
think there's trying to, please everyone. You're not going to please anybody, and you're not going to have a clear message.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to communicate that to the world if that's what you think that the mission is supposed to do.
And for Adventism to have such a specific message to prove Satan's claim that the commandments can't be kept, it's a message of vindicating God. It's a message of a unique kind of judgment, not just the judgment that's spoken of in the Bible. It's a unique kind of judgment, and it's a message to be raised by this remnant, to convey this three angels message, to prepare people for the imminent return. That message, like you say, people come into the church and they come in with these kind of nebulous, disingenuous draw cards. I loved what you said, switch and bait and switch, 100%. And people come in, and you have to, if you're a liberal progressive, you have to steer them to the right church where they'll, get more of a progressive view. And then within that, those who are coming in because of Ellen White and the pillars, they suddenly go, like you, when you came back in, what's going on here? This is not it. So I guess the next point is to go, I wonder how we can stimulate this conversation more, and maybe having it today will help that. But I've tried to get people on that I know are traditional Adventists, and they'll come on and share their beliefs, but they won't come on and say, look, get out of our hair, you progressives. And the progressives will come on and say, no, but we all love each other and we're inclusive, and I can be whatever kind of Adventist I want to be. Because of this kind of almost fog of deception, a lot of people genuinely don't really even know. And I've seen podcasters happily talking about things that they believe in that are quite liberal. And as the church becomes more conservative and traditional in leadership, the Ted Wilson model, these guys are finding out that they lose their jobs if they speak up. And so I did a show with Rodrigo Custodio, who's on tomorrow, where we've essentially got 14 questions. We did 2 lots of 7 that a currently employed ordained pastor, the challenge is come on and see if you can answer these questions. Traditional Adventists could easily answer them. These guys, no one will come on. Now, of course, we've got, non-disclosure stuff and you can't reveal stuff, but this is the gospel. This is the beauty of your church. You're supposed to shine it. You can't come on and answer these questions because you might lose your job.
And
So
I find
how
that
do
a
we
little bit.
motivate each of those sides to come on and talk more? And sorry, I cut
Yeah.
you off there too.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the solution, to be honest. I'm just willing to get involved in the conversation and try to open up the dialogue, because without talking to each other, it just gets tribal, and it gets like
Yeah.
and yeah, it gets really, really polarizing. And I think that the COVID pandemic was another highlight, like it highlighted one of the major issues we have in society, and that is just a dialogue with people that we disagree with.
Mm.
Like, that was so
Mm.
polarizing, and people were getting it broke up families on the views, and it was just tough. Like, you couldn't even talk to somebody
Ah,
about it,
no.
and it was really tough. And I'm just like, if all that did was just highlight how tribal we've become, and unable to communicate with people and talk with people in a civil way, with people that we disagree with, how are we ever going to reach the world? How are we
Yeah.
ever going to dialogue with people
If we
out there if
if you
we
can't with each
assume,
other.
yeah, if we can't even talk to each other about things? And that was what was really upsetting to me. And I don't know the solution. Like, I I think it's a tough position the church is in now. And look, you're not going to get much from me in terms of politics, because I don't really follow it at all, particularly church politics. It's way over my head. I don't know how even the church is structured and run on at a organizational level. I have no idea about any of that stuff. To me, the person coming in getting elected as president, it really doesn't make any difference to me in my life. And that's probably it's just ignorance is bliss for me in that sense. And there's probably a lot I could learn about how the church runs and things like that, that I probably would be more effective for me to know. But at this stage, I really don't know the solution, because there's pastors in the church that have grown up, and it's probably been a lack of leadership. I think the leadership have let these pastors down, with them coming through, able to study, able to get jobs without believing or even knowing what the fundamentals are of the Adventist church, employing them, making them dependent on an institution that they really don't, believe the core pillars. And now they're in a position where if they go, hang on, I studied and this is not what I believe from the Bible. But if they say it, they lose their job. So it is a difficult situation to be in.
Mm,
I admit that.
mm,
And
mm.
I sort of sympathize with that situation. I think it's been uh, probably the leadership has let them down, because I don't
Yeah.
think that these pastors should have been employed in the first place. But you can't get rid of them now. Like, what are you going to do? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a difficult situation. Like, I don't know the solution. I have no idea. But yeah, we're here now, and we should
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, and I'm the same. I'm not sure of the solution. I've got like distant ideas roaming around in my head, and they're slowly becoming clearer because of the dialogue, because of having these
Mm,
conversations. And one thing that to me is clear is that there needs to be less, uh, hey, we're doing things behind the scenes kind of discussions, and
mm,
more publicly with that.
yeah,
Most you've got the church structure, you've got your grassroots churches
mm,
overseen by conferences, overseen by one or two unions, overseen in that part of the world by one division, and then
mm,
there's 13 divisions, including the general division, and it's just a
mm,
trickle down kind of leadership. And there's been times, for example, um, when Des Ford's theology was kind of having a lot more impact, when
mm,
the leadership of at division level here in Australia and union level was supportive. But those times are fleeting. Usually the leadership is supportive of the traditional view, and the Ted Wilson leadership of the last 15 years has been definitely trying to limit the progress of the progressives. And a few weeks ago, I don't know if you've seen this book. Have you seen Reclaiming the Prophet?
No, I saw your program that brought that
Talking
up maybe a week or two ago, and
and I think
yeah,
it's absolutely classic that these
mhm,
guys finally do try to to speak up
Mm.
in a more positive way. And these liberal progressive academics and scholars, people I've admired my whole life, they were my tribe. They were the leaders of my tribe, but it was all behind the scenes. Hey, you hang in there, Pete. You know, it's coming. And look what we found about this and this plagiarism and this over here. And look at that. And
Mhm.
can you believe this? Look at this. Go and read this, they'd say, you know.
Mhm. Okay. Can't see Peter anymore. Oh, is he back? Okay, so it seems that people can see me, but not Peter. So I'm not sure exactly what to do in this situation. Yeah. Some people say I should run the show. Well, I don't know how to bring anyone up, so it'd be good to be able to talk to some people that see the same things happening in the church that we've been talking about, the two groups, because it's my understanding that there are two different gospels and in the church at the moment. So some people might not agree. Some people might say that the traditional and the progressive side have the same gospel but differ on other things. But I disagree. I think fundamentally they've got there's two gospels in the church, and I think both need to acknowledge that and clarify exactly, what the gospel is and what the plan of salvation entails, and we should discuss that. I think that's probably a good starting point. But I don't know. I feel that there is too much ambiguity on both sides, uh, and I think that needs to be clarified and talked through. And I don't think that can happen if we don't talk with each other. I think both sides probably have things that they can teach the other, and but I just don't know the way forward. Not sure how long Pete's going to be out for, but I don't know. Maybe in the comments you guys can put in what if you agree that there's two gospels within the Adventist church, or do you think there's just one? And yeah, I'll be interested to hear people's thoughts on that. Do I believe that? Okay, that's a good question. Do I believe that Christians are required to observe the Sabbath? I believe a Christian is someone who follows Christ to the best of their knowledge and what light they've been given. And if you've had light on the Sabbath and you can see it is part of the law of God, and that the new covenant brings you into harmony with the law of God, then you are obligated, morally speaking, to observe the Sabbath. That's my view. As long as a foundation. I'm not sure about what the three immortals is, David. Can you clarify that? As long as the foundation teaches you about the three immortals, it's not Christian. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by three immortals. Yes, the Adventist gospel is the three angels' messages, the everlasting gospel. But I guess we would see it as that is the gospel that's been talked about in the four gospels and in all the writings of Paul and even in the Old Testament. I think the everlasting gospel was given in Genesis 3:15. Yes, I agree with Leanne. Yes, I believe that there is just one complete gospel. Absolutely. And I think Paul talks about that as well. I think that most Christians separate the Bible into Old Testament and New Testament, and they say, here's the plan of salvation in the Old Testament, something new in the New Testament, and we're Christians, so we go in the New Testament. I don't agree with that. I think there is one gospel from Genesis 3:15 all the way through to Revelation 22. Into Old Testament and New Testament, and they say, here's the plan of salvation in the Old Testament, something new in the New Testament. We're Christians, so we go in the New Testament. Hey, Peter's back.
I think I'm back. Oh dear, oh dear.
Just answering a few questions.
I
in the chat.
know. I love that. I could see you continue on my phone, so I was excited that you were doing that. Thank you for doing that. But
I thought I was the one that cut out. So for a while, I just wasn't doing anything. I'm like, oh, did I lose connection? I was like trying to find you on Facebook, but it's all good. People in the chat could still see me. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
let's have a conversation.
it's happened a couple of times. My Wi-Fi at home is about 50 meters from here.
Okay.
And sometimes if someone puts on a toaster or something, the whole house power goes off and the Wi-Fi as well. So I was glad that yes, I've known that that sometimes I disappear and the guest just keeps sitting there chatting. So that's good that you did that. Thank you. And thank you everyone for your patience and for asking some great questions there. And I'm happy to go back to that in a minute too. If you like. Sounds like you were still on a bit of a roll. So
now we'll continue back where you left off, reclaiming the prophet.
Yeah, so with that book, that these guys that I truly really respected and helped inform so much of my liberal progressive Adventist view, where they revealed a lot about plagiarism, about seeing Ellen White as an inspiration but not a prophet. And 5 years ago, I've left 9 years now, but 5 years ago, since doing this show and over 400 interviews in 5 years, I would start realizing that this kind of prophet that they want to reclaim or revise, as Robert Wolfgram said the other day, is a better title, Revising the Prophet. I said to them, if you present your Adventism, this liberal progressive Adventism that you say you're allowed to be any Adventist you want to, as soon as you do, you get shut down, suppressed, cancelled. The church is leaning towards supporting the traditional view again. And they were like, no, we can publicly speak. And I said, yeah, but there's people who have lost their jobs because they've said that the Holy Spirit is not the seal of God is not the Sabbath, it's the Holy Spirit, and they literally lost their jobs. And so they released this book, and I hate to sound smug about it, but within 6 days it was banned and cancelled. And they're all still saying, oh, well, maybe it's just for the GC. No, the leadership of the Adventist Church now is conservative, and they don't want you guys sharing your progressive gospel faith anymore. When is the liberal progressive Adventist going to realize that and wake up to the fact that they are being squeezed out. And they're still there going, oh, no, we've got hope. Well, I can be any kind of Adventist I want to be. And I'm saying, okay, then, well, if you believe that and you're an currently employed Adventist worker, come on the show and share this unique, special, progressive kind of Adventism, and you'll find that you might lose your job. Or your standing, and that's why they're not coming on. So as I said earlier, yeah, if you work for the Commonwealth Bank, there's things you won't disclose, of course, but this is the gospel. This is the thing they're supposed to shine proudly from and shout from the rooftops. And there's something wrong if, I can understand if I put that challenge out there and had only 10% or 20% come on the show or any public platform, but when it's zero,
Yeah.
something's wrong.
Mm.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think that they're in a tough situation. Like I was sharing before, the people that do have views that are contrary to, or they believe is progressing from the pillars of Adventism, and they've taken a job in that institution, and they're in that awkward position where, yeah, if they say they actually don't agree with what was originally laid down, that was error, we need to move past that, then they are in opposition to the teachings of the church. And I think that the church does have authority to be able to set boundaries and preserve what they believe is truth.
Yeah.
And so that puts the progressive people that are employed in the church in an awkward situation. But the fact is that I think it's probably leadership's fault, to be honest,
Yeah.
because they've allowed these people to take positions without really, finding out if they do uphold the teachings of the church. And I don't know the solution. I really don't. I'm someone that's much smarter needs to come on and share what could happen. I'm just about the conversation of,
Yeah.
hey, let's clarify both of our positions and actually acknowledge that there's two.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm the same. We need the smarter guys to come on and come up with some solutions. But the smarter guys seem to think there's nothing to see. There's no problem here. And we're just going to write a book that we reclaim Advent, the prophet. I think, like you say, the leadership really has a lot to answer for here. They could clearly say we welcome both groups or we don't.
Yeah.
And because they aren't being decisive, essentially they're being weak. Because of this weak leadership, people are uprising on both sides. Like even the Ted Wilson framework is being challenged by the traditional Adventists because they're like, you're not being bold enough. You're not being true enough to our traditional pillars. The Ron Kellys, the Conrad Vines, these guys are have a sense of angst or frustration with leadership because they aren't stepping up to the plate and leading. And it's this wishy-washy leadership that people are getting sick of. The progressives are sick of it. The traditionals are sick of it. I tell you what, though, when the liberals are sick of it, nothing happens anyway. It's like it's all just go and hug a tree and have a nice haystack and happy Sabbath. Sing a few praise and worship songs from hills. But when the traditional Adventists have been nose out of joint, they are monetized, organized, network. And I tell you what, the leadership had better be very careful. Gillian Ford said to me the other day, if Ted's not careful, the only Adventists he'll have are the progressives, because the traditionals are about to do some pretty big things. And they don't just talk about behind the scenes and do nothing. They act on it. The whole Conrad
The conviction of what they believe is true,
Yeah.
and they believe they have an obligation to share that truth publicly and unreservedly, and
Yes.
that's what they're convicted to do.
Yeah.
And
Well, you look at the, you could hear it in the voices of the Standish brothers earlier when I played that recording. They're passionate. They want to fight for their church. M.L. Andreessen, he fought against the questions on doctrine till his dying breath.
Yeah, one thing you can't say about the Standish brothers, you can't accuse them of being ambiguous in what they believed and where they were. You knew exactly where they were at, what they thought about you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's the right method for everybody. Someone like me that has my background in work and my upbringing, I can handle very direct messages. But not everyone is going to be reached that way, because some people that's going to come across as like hateful and bigoted and all that sort of stuff. And I understand that. So there needs to be more ways of communicating what we're convicted that the truth is, and that's where I believe that there some of the sort of more progressive side can help in the sense of how they actually communicate
Yeah.
to people, and to show empathy and all that sort of stuff. I think that's something that they can definitely teach the other side. I don't think there's necessarily we have to do it one way. We don't have to do it, necessarily the Standish Brothers way, although I feel that has been effective for certain people, but it's not going to reach everyone. That's why there were 12 apostles, and they all had different personalities and they had different ways of teaching. And yeah.
I love what you said about the ambiguity. The Standish brothers, they weren't, how did you say it? They weren't ambiguous about their beliefs.
They weren't nebulous. You knew exactly where you were at. You knew exactly what was in their head, and you knew where you stood with them.
And you know what? I kind of respect that about Ayrton Kohler and Ted Wilson. I don't have to read between the lines. I know where they stand. I can't think of any progressive leader on the planet. None have come into my head right now that don't speak. They all seem to be very ambiguous.
Well, I could never be a politician. I could never be a politician, and because I think a lot of these guys could be politicians, and some of these pastors and stuff that I see come on, and like they word things so eloquently, you never know what they actually believe.
Yeah, I
You're
know.
like, wow, that sounds great, but what do you actually mean when you're saying that?
Yeah.
So,
And our Adventist pastors and leaders are very much like that. I see in the church today the only people that are speaking without ambiguity are the traditional Adventists. They're speaking boldly and they're speaking clearly what they want, what they don't want. And
but I think that's what people need.
I 100% agree.
Because people need to know, okay, what are you teaching? What are you guys actually all about?
Yeah.
And I need to be put into a position where I can either say I accept that or I reject it. Okay,
Yeah.
then you move on.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I appreciate clear, because then you can have a dialogue. You can actually say what you agree or disagree on. A lot of the progressives are more offering what they believe clearly now, but they're all retired.
Yeah.
Where's the courageous liberal progressive Adventist paid employee creating a movement that pushes back on what they believe is a false teaching of Adventism? They'll soon find out it's not false. They might not agree with it. But traditional Adventism has its roots and alignment in the pillars that have never been taken down. Bon Barris writes, there's no such thing as the amalgamation of the progressive and traditional sevies. And here's an interesting thing. You touched on it there. I look at both sides of this and I just see incredible, creative, vibrant, inquiring minds on both sides. I think the Adventist Church has lost so many incredible people because of this conflict. I look at my tribe was the Des Ford theology kind of side, and hundreds of pastors lost their jobs in the 80s. That's over 400 in Australia and America, the USA. You add their families to that, their kids to that, their friends, other people that left the church that weren't just employees. There's something like an estimated over 40 million Adventists have left the church since the 60s. And that's a big number. And I just think as a movement, forget the theology, as a movement that needs vibrant, colorful, exciting, interesting, creative people, the Adventist church has purged and lost so many amazing people. And Bond says there, there's no such thing as the amalgamation of the progressive and the traditional sevies. And I think he might be right. And if that's the case, then really they do need to get out of each other's hair, but they don't. The liberal progressive doesn't want to. As a more traditional Adventist, what could you say to a liberal progressive that might encourage them to get out of your hair and to stop impeding your church's progress?
Well, I don't really see it as them being in my hair, so to speak. I would rather them go back and study what the actual church teaches and then make a decision. Do I support this? Do I want to stay part of this institution or not? And a lot of people have gone down that study and have left, like, the Ryan
Yeah.
Days and yourself.
Yeah.
And I respect that. I think that most people are staying because out of ignorance. Now, I don't want to psychoanalyze the
No.
rest of these people because I don't know. That's why I want to have the conversation. I actually want to talk to somebody about, okay, what is the mindset behind staying in a church that you believe is in fundamental error at its
Yeah.
foundation? You think that
Yeah.
Ellen White was
Why?
not shown visions from God, and she doesn't leave the option of you picking and choosing, I can show you statement after statement. She doesn't leave that option for you to read her in that way. Oh, you'll take a little bit, take a little bit of that. She says, no, this was shown to me by God. It's
Yeah.
either from God or from Satan. That's what she
That's what
says
she
in her
said.
words.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you either take it or leave it. And I just don't think that many people have actually studied for themselves actually what the church teaches. I really would encourage them to, okay, go and read, all the volumes of the testimonies and see how the church was established. Go and read all like some of the pioneers' writings of what they taught about the judgment, the sanctuary, and the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation. If you don't see light in that from the Bible, if you don't see that that's harmonizing with the Bible, you think that's in error, and this is what the church was founded on, then you need to make a decision
Yeah.
on if you're okay with staying with that and supporting it financially and all that sort of stuff. And some people will be okay with staying in it.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that. If you say, look, I don't agree with it, but I want to stay anyway, but you at least know what the church's mission is and
Yeah.
its message, then we can at least deal with that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that these guys have studied it deeply,
Mhm.
but feel like they cling to this thing where Ellen White says, don't take what I say. Bible say what present the Bible, and if I'm wrong, then go with what the Bible says.
Mhm. Mhm.
They misuse that statement that she made there. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. But what they've done is go, well, we were able to come to terms with it and progress and move on and see her as
Mhm.
an inspirational person, but not
Mhm.
necessarily a prophet.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
From what I see in those statements, she is trying to, I guess, prevent her writings from being a stumbling block for people giving up the faith in Christ. And I think that's the reason why she kept on pointing people back to the Bible. If they were a stumbling block, just go back to the Bible. At that stage, you know, there's many other churches that those people could have gone to. Could have look. I'm just staying with the Bible. I don't see light in the Adventist message in your visions anymore. I'm just going back to my original church, and I'm going back to the Bible.
yeah.
And she would be more in favor of that than them staying on and basically giving up their faith because of they couldn't see harmony with her visions and the truth of Christianity and giving it up altogether. I think that's what
Yeah.
she was opposed to.
Yeah, I think she was more saying, look, if you don't see light in what I'm saying and the visions I've been given and how they dovetail with the Bible, then you are better just to go.
Yeah.
But I think she was also trying to say, hey, I'm all about the Bible as well.
Yeah.
And I think, like, even Des Ford, right? You could not find a actually, I'm getting a bit of an echo on your mic. Do you mind just turning your screen volume down? Not your earplug, just the overall volume, and it won't come back through your headset then. Just a couple of notches.
Okay. Good. Is that any better?
Check 1, 2. Yep, that's a lot better. Yeah, that's great.
Fantastic.
Thank you. It was only a tiny bit. So someone like Des Ford,
Mhm.
and I've heard Gillian say this publicly, that Des, I'm paraphrasing, that Des promised to never split the church, and he kept that promise. And I'm fully believe that was his and her intention. But the irony is that perhaps he did split the church more than it ever has been split. And I don't blame him for that. I blame the leadership role of Glacier View and the lies they told afterwards. The reality is the majority of the scholars and academics and theologians at Glacier View did feel that they could reach a consensus with Des and keep him in the church and make it work. The lie they told afterwards was that the majority didn't see light in what Des said. That is not true at all. So this deception goes on. But my point is that, yeah, I think it was a kangaroo court. I think he was very unfairly treated, and for him to be called a employee of the devil kind of thing is very unfair, and it's an ad hominem attack that just doesn't look at what he was saying. It attacks the person, not the claims. But the point is, he loved Ellen White. He saw a way to keep this reductionism of her claims on the tape, to reduce her from, like, he literally believes she got the 2,300 days wrong and all of that. But he still felt that you could keep her in the mix. And this is what the liberal progressives do. They're very intelligent. They're very smart. They've looked deeply at it, but they still want Ellen to work in there, even though they've minimized what she does to the point of making Adventism non-distinctive. And as Ron Kelly said, that unravels the very core message of Adventism. Ted Wilson was saying a lot at the GC. I was just watching. I've been watching it every day. The Bible and the spirit of prophecy. Those two have to go together for Adventism to work. And if you're an academic or a scholar or a progressive and you can't see yourself saying these words, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy need to go hand in hand to share the Adventist message, you're never going to change that. You've got to somehow wake yourself up and go, okay, it's not going to change. What do we do now? Let's put our energy now into maybe something that's different. Like you and I have said, we don't know. But they are constantly trying to reclaim Ellen instead of trying to reclaim her or revise her or work her into the mix. They need to say, look, we do have something different. We believe something special. Let's foster that and let's shout that from the rooftops.
Potentially. And I think I shared with you a couple of weeks ago that there's always going to be people like me that come into the church and do their own study of what the pioneers taught, what Ellen White taught, what she clearly says, and they're not going to see how these academics try and harmonize her with and also rejecting it. Like we just don't see it. Like we see her clear statements, black and white, and like just
Yeah.
the everyday layman like me, just going doing my own reading, and I
Yeah.
see things like God showed me this, and then when I hear academics and things like that, oh well, she didn't really mean that, or she
Yeah.
was just a prophet for her time. We don't see that in her writings.
No.
And so we don't know how to harmonize it. So there's always going to be people that are just going to take black and white. Either I reject her or I accept her as, being shown and led by God. Like
Well,
that's basically how we
you're
would see it.
actually reading the text correctly and accurately. You are accurately reading what she's saying. They are the ones playing hippy trippy, little mind games.
Yeah, and then it comes to the point where you're like, okay, which statements do I take, at face value? Which ones do I have to reject and twist around and, do basically, I don't know, mental gymnastics to try and make it fit. Like I just I just need to take I'm just very black and white with that. I'm just like I take it 100% or I leave it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just how it is. And I know that's not what everyone does. I know that's not how everyone makes decisions and comes to conclusions, but for me that's how I have to do things, and there will be always people that are going to be like me.
Yeah. 100%.
So I don't know how the two are going to harmonize, because you're not going to you're not going to once someone has studied through and been settled on what they believe, it's very hard for them to do a backflip and see light in these other scholarly works that come out and say, oh well, Ellen White didn't really claim to be a prophet. Well,
Yeah.
none of the prophets did. John the Baptist didn't claim to be a prophet. When he was
Yeah.
actually asked that question, he didn't say, oh yeah, I'm a prophet. Like,
Yeah.
none of them did. You
Yeah.
have to test a prophet by the biblical tests, and people that have looked at Ellen White's writings in her ministry and have tested her biblically, and some people come to different conclusions, but those that do affirm her
Yeah.
as being inspired by God, it's very hard to shake that conviction.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's always going to be people that are just going to go back
Yeah.
to what was originally given, because even you look at the church history and the history of God's people throughout the Old and New Testament. Most of the time, reform and revival comes by going back to what was given, not going forward to something new. That's
Yeah.
not how things usually went. Even the Old Testament, I mean, even in the New Testament, Paul and the apostles were pointing back to the Old Testament, saying, this is what was originally meant to be the message. And
Mm.
you guys have got it wrong. You've gone off track. And
Yeah.
the New Testament writers are their way of explaining what the Old Testament was actually trying to teach. So that's how we see things as really what the progressive and reform should be, is going back, not forward to something nebulous and not defined. Like that's the thing. Like I think you had Brendan Valiant. Is it Valiant? Brendan Valiant
Yeah.
on a few times. I love that last name. What a last name.
Yeah.
But he was saying that, and I 100% agree with him on this point, and we disagree on things, but I like how he presents his views. But he says that I believe something happened in 1844 because I can see that, like, what's the alternative you guys are offering? It's nothing. You can throw rocks at it, but then you don't offer anything to
Yeah.
replace it. But
Replace it. Yeah.
1844, now maybe you don't agree with it, and there's people that don't agree anything happened, but it does, for those that have studied it, it does have, when you accept that something did happen on 1844, it does have a lot of uh, explanatory power in terms of the fulfillment of the prophecies,
Yeah.
in terms of the sanctuary feasts in the Old Testament and what they symbolized. It has all of this that people see, oh wow, there's this whole framework that is put together when you unlock the sanctuary message. But then people that are saying that that's not true, what are they giving in as an alternative
Yeah.
to explain
Exactly.
1844 and to explain Daniel 8:14? I don't see them
Yeah.
giving something that's substantial. They just say, oh, it's wrong. They got it wrong. Okay, well, that's fine. But if you want to be a good student and you want to persuade people, you need to offer something that's more, I guess, clearer, better, harmonizing, and I don't see that from the other side. I
No.
just see them constantly throwing rocks at
Yeah.
what they believe is wrong, but they
Yeah.
never go, okay, here's the actual truth, and here's
Yeah.
where it lines up, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, I agree 100%. And this book, I pretty much I've interviewed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those, however many names are there. I think there's 13 or so, and most of them have influenced me over the last 30 years,
mm,
and that influence has powerfully undermined my belief in Ellen White.
mm,
Powerfully. As I started exploring Adventism in the 90s,
mhm,
I was a bit too young to fully comprehend what was going on in the early 80s. I was a teenager, I think. But I was involved with music and surfing, and I didn't really focus on the politics or the theology. And
mhm,
there was a whole lot of stuff going on in the early 80s that, like they had Lindy Chamberlain as well, was going on around the same time as Glacier View. But as I began exploring the works of these guys in the 90s and beyond, and even more recently, I would love reading their stuff. I'd go, oh, wow, check out that. Like there's another book written by one of the scholarly types, Sydney Cleveland, Whitewashed.
mm,
And I read that, and I was like, I just can't believe in Ellen White anymore. And for some reason, I expected them to then offer me something else that I could cling to. And all they would offer me is hope. It's going to change. And I'm like, well, what are you thinking? What's going to change is just that I can be more contemporary with my music. I don't even care if I am or not. Like, what are you telling me is going to change? You've undermined Ellen White for me. Now, what are you going to do? And here they are a few weeks ago. Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to reclaim the prophet and write an honest defense of Ellen White's gift. And, the White Estate sees this and goes, what on earth are you guys doing? And bans it, within 6 days, I think. It's all over. And so not only did they undermine my belief in Ellen White, they offered false hope for me for 30 years. And when I left, they've implied that I'm attacking them and have betrayed them. And when they then go with their big, hey, we're in our 70s now, we can release a book reclaiming the prophet, it gets banned and confirms that the church does not want to support in any way what it is they've got. And so I'm saying to them, well, what do you have? What have you got to offer?
yeah,
And for me, once I'd looked at the data, I wasn't convinced, so I had to leave. So I'm not saying people should look at the data and leave, but there is something to see here. Something needs to be discussed.
Yeah, no, I'm all about the conversation, and I'm all about, like, part of my journey was going through, uh, not formal, but logical training and learning philosophy, like basic philosophical strategies in order to arrive at correct, at least try to avoid erroneous thinking, to be able to come to conclusions soundly. And part of that process was uncovering the best thing to be able to talk to people is to ask them what they actually believe, and then follow up with why they believe it
Yeah.
and how they came to that conclusion. Those leading people through that series of questioning
Yeah.
is so powerful for yourself, but also for them. And I think this is where both sides can actually help each other.
Yeah.
Both sides can actually clarify what the other is actually believing and
Yeah.
what they actually think. And we can talk about how we come to our conclusions. And the people that are not so sure can see the conversation. They go, hey, I see merit in that side.
Yes.
And they can actually be defined on where they actually land, rather than this just weird middle ground,
Yes. I love.
wishy-washy, not sure what we want, not sure
Yeah.
what we're doing,
Yeah.
not sure what I believe, not sure what the church
But hey,
actually believes.
don't attack my beliefs. Well, what
Yeah.
are they then? Tell me
Yeah,
what
what
they
are
are.
they?
Come on the show.
I don't know if I'm attacking them or not, because I don't know what you believe. Yeah, so
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
That's
I get that a lot. Yeah, that is so true. Well, it's so funny. I smiled when you explained that that is called street epistemology, and
mm,
I've often said that that's
yeah,
what interests me the most.
yeah,
What do you believe?
yeah,
Why do you believe it? Can you
yeah,
defend it?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that third part because you can ask some tricky questions to see if they
yeah,
do really believe it or not.
yeah.
And a lot of people go, "Oh, crumbs, I don't know."
Well, I think that most people have been basically socialized into what they believe, and they believe slogans that they hear, but they actually don't deeply understand what they believe, and
Mm,
they haven't really thought about it much. Now, some people have,
mm,
but a lot of people haven't, because when I ask people what you actually believe, like, okay, you say you believe the gospel, what does that actually mean?
mm.
I want you to clearly define to
What is
me
that?
what the gospel is. What does that mean? Because everyone says, "Oh, I love Jesus, I love the gospel."
Yeah.
What does that actually mean? Because we probably are talking about two different things. So
Yeah,
let's clarify it. Let's remove the ambiguity.
yeah,
Let's bring out those hidden assumptions that we have about things, and
yeah,
let's get it out in the open. Then we can actually dialogue with each other. But I feel that a lot of the time when you actually ask them what they actually mean by those things that they're saying, don't know. What
yeah,
does it mean that
yeah,
Jesus covers you with his righteousness? Because
yeah,
we both will say that, yes, that's true, but both of us are meaning completely different things when we're saying it.
yeah,
And so we're talking past each other when we don't have those
yeah,
clarifying questions.
yes,
And but the dialogue shuts down because we have not built skills to talk to people that we don't agree with. And that's
yeah,
really a sad thing to
yeah,
have in a Christian or profess Christian, belief system.
yeah,
But I think that it will help people if they actually do start thinking what they believe.
yeah,
I think that people need to have those thoughts about, oh yeah, what do I actually believe, and why
yeah,
do I believe that? That
yeah,
that goes a long way in some. And I think if people were a little bit more solidified in what they believe, they wouldn't be so. I guess I sometimes get the sense that people are very insecure when they come to these conversations, and that's why it gets heated, it gets emotional. And I don't get emotional when I talk about my beliefs. I can have anybody come up here, doesn't matter what academic level they are at, they can come and grill me as much as they want of
yeah,
what I believe and why I believe it, and I'll give them the answers. This is just what I believe and why I believe it. I don't
yeah,
have to convince you about it, but I'm going to show you the evidence, and you can
yeah,
follow the trail of how I got to there.
yeah. I and
And I'm
I
happy
think
to do that with
and
anything.
I think that's exciting, and
Mm,
one thing I've noticed when I have traditional Adventists on the program, they all say that.
mm,
And when I have former Adventists on the program, they all defend their new
mm,
minus Ellen White leave
yeah,
the Adventist church beliefs, and
yeah,
they're excited about it as well. There's a
mm,
conviction to both sides that I don't see in the liberal progressives. And
mm,
sorry, my tribe, that I still love you guys and love hanging out with you, and I'm not meaning to sound critical, but I'm just saying make a stand, make
mm,
a stand for goodness sake,
mm.
because you're just chirping on about how you can believe whatever kind of Adventism you want to believe. Well, okay, well, tell me what that is.
Mm.
Come and share that. I don't want to even. I won't even tear it to bits. I just want to hear what it is.
Well, for
Yeah,
me, if I was say I was a Mormon or a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, so to speak, and I was presented things where Joseph Smith was clearly shown to be a false prophet, and I couldn't harmonize his teachings with the Bible anymore. I couldn't stay a part of that institution. I'd have to
yeah,
leave, like,
yeah,
just on a
yeah.
moral conviction of what truth is, because I care about what truth is.
Yeah.
I don't know maybe everyone doesn't
It's
see it
that
that way. I don't know.
I think, like, I see it that way now, but it
Mm,
took me 25 years to
yeah.
get to that. I would say in the early 90s, with all the reading material of the guys I just mentioned, the
Mm,
incredible books that were coming out, by
mhm,
Bob Brinsmead at the time, in my mind, I no longer believed in Ellen White the same way anymore. But it took
mm,
25 years and to really be an older dad and hold my little girl in my hands, and I'm looking at the women's ordination thing, and I'm thinking, what do I
Mhm.
believe about that? And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
what do I believe about the IJ and the sanctuary? And I thought,
Mhm.
hang on, I don't even believe that. What am I doing?
Mm.
I'm about to raise a daughter as an old man, and
Mhm.
and what am I offering her?
Mm.
That I'm part of a belief system I don't believe, but I'm just a
Yeah.
part of it.
Mm.
So for me, I can see why people take a long time, but
Yeah.
essentially, if you realize that not only are they two separate theologies,
Mm.
and that's okay. You could even have a denomination that has two separate theologies that kind of agree and disagree. Adventism is not that. Adventism has two separate theologies that don't mix.
Mm.
They are an anathema to each other. They
Mm.
oppose each other. They hold
Mhm.
each other back. People are
Mhm.
leaving the church in droves,
Mhm.
and they're both being ineffective.
Mhm. Yeah. Because you have the one group, I see them as two gospels. One group believes that fundamentally the gospel, the plan of salvation is to bring believers into harmony with the law of God. And there are the other group that will say that's work-based, that's legalism, and will reject that and will say, no, this is the gospel. You just need to believe and accept Jesus, and that, works will come later on, etc. I'm not sure exactly what their gospel is because they never clarify it, but that's what I assume it actually is talking about. The more evangelical, what
Yeah,
you hear sort of evangelicals, present the gospel as like works is like a later thing and something that, the Holy Spirit does over time, etc. And while I agree with some of that stuff, the Adventist killer, message was that, you look at Wagner and Jones, what they taught on what the gospel was, and it's very different. It's very different to what you hear in evangelical world.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know. You can't harmonize the two. I don't see how you can. Some
no,
people seem to be able to, but I think there's maybe some cognitive dissonance there. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I'd
yeah,
like to
yeah,
learn why they are what
yeah.
they think, but I never hear from them because
Yeah.
they don't seem to be able to come out of the woodwork. I'm trying to tease them out with some
That's what we're
questioning,
both
like,
doing. We're both doing that.
come and have a chat. Like, no one's gonna, yell at you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, wow. Okay, so just shifting gear totally for a
Mhm.
minute,
Mhm.
and, some people were concerned that this was gonna be a big program about just promoting traditional Adventism. I tried to point out to people, no, that's not
Mhm.
what Samuel and I will be talking about. We're
Mhm.
talking about how there are these two theologies and how they're at
Mhm.
loggerheads and how there's empirical data to confirm there's
Mhm.
evidence out there
Yeah.
that these guys are theologically opposed.
Mm.
Um, we're just trying to have a discussion, and I hope a time comes when the that people will come on the program and just talk
Mm.
about this
Yeah.
and not take the this notion that I'm attacking from
Mm.
both
Mm.
sides. Like
Yeah,
I
I
get
know.
it in the
Yeah.
neck from both sides.
Mhm. Mhm.
I I would love Blair Lemke and Matt Parra
Yeah.
and some of these guys to come on. Brendan, another guy, not Valiant. Oh, I've just got a mental blank. There's several that I would love
Mhm.
to come on the show, and I think if they watch today, they might be more inclined to, because I think they'll see where I'm coming from a bit more.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
Yeah, well, they can articulate things much better than me. I know Matt and I know Blair, and they're more theological than me.
yeah,
I'm a layman, like, yeah, as layman as you can get, and but those guys are a lot more academic than
well,
me, and they'll be able to articulate things better. But I'll just see things and call them how I see them. Just
yeah, well, I'm a
yeah,
layman too, and I think
yeah,
we're at least being willing to have the conversation and encourage them. These guys
mm,
can come on, and Matt Parra and Blair might be able to say, well, this is theologically what's very different about us and the Des Ford theological guys, and
mm,
have that kind of. I think you'd be able to as well, but that's where the conversation could go.
Mm.
So two
Mhm.
things I wanted to cover before we kind of wrap up.
Mhm.
One, the Arise group in Australia,
Mhm.
essentially funded by light bearers,
Yep.
promoted by David North, who sadly has passed on now. He and I were at Avondale together.
Okay.
I think Paul Fua might have been involved. There's a bunch of guys there, either North New South Wales, I think, that wanted to bring David Ashrick over. They wanted to bring in a more traditional pillars of the faith kind of movement within the Adventist church. And David Ashrick was here for a couple of years. They founded Arise or continued it on. I don't know. But, can you confirm for me, and I have no judgment on this, I think I would love to see the One Project and Arise. My dream would be that the church could see a diverse inclusivity and accept both. I've realized they can't. I know it's not possible, but the Arise movement is definitely more at a fundamental fundamental movement is more focused on bringing the church back to its traditional roots theologically, isn't it? And all I can see from the people rave about them, and I'm not criticizing them in the slightest, but I see a trend. I mean, I know North, he's passed, as I said, but I know these guys. I know that they are on the page of traditional Adventism. But some people lately have said, "Oh, no, they're not. They're just liberal progressives." And I'm like, no way. Can you give any light on that?
Well, to be honest, I can't really comment too much on the Arise program because I've never gone through it. I can only comment on what I have heard from people that have gone through it. I know people that have, and some people that do know what is taught there. And look, I do think that it is probably an attempt to go back to more of a fundamental uh, traditional style of Adventism. However, when you talk to the traditional Adventists in the conservative side that have studied themselves, that have gone through, like similar to myself, experience that read the pioneers books. They'll read, the testimonies and all that sort of stuff. Those people that have done those sort of studies, they'll say that Arise is progressive. They'll say that
Yes.
Arise is more of a
Yeah.
hybrid, maybe.
That's right. I've heard. I know that the traditional Adventists in recent times have lost a bit of faith in the Arise movement, but at its core, at the start, it
Mm.
was definitely founded on, hey, let's bring our church back to its pioneer beliefs.
Probably that was probably an attempt, but I think when you look at the tr- the traditional guys that have done a lot of study themselves and that are coming through, they still see that they're not going far enough with the message. They're
Yes,
not they're not
I agree.
really standing out like Adventism of old, so to speak. Like
Yeah.
not like our pioneers were
No,
teaching and
no,
those sort of things. And I don't know what the thinking is with Arise because I'm not connected to it. I've never
no.
been through it. So I can't really comment on what they actually teach and what the mindset is.
Yeah,
But I do think that they're more exposed to our the original teaching of sanctuary message and Daniel 8:14 and
yeah.
even Ellen White's writings. They're more exposed to those sort of
And the
things.
2,300 days, they
2,300 day, that sort of stuff. But from what I've heard with the other guys that haven't gone through it, but are more very much grounded in more of the pioneers' writings and books and things like that, that want to see that message go forward, they're saying that Arise is not there yet. If
yes,
that's
yeah,
their goal, then they're not doing what
yeah,
our
yeah,
pioneers did.
yes, yeah. No, I've heard that too.
Mm.
And the thing that we'll close on, because I know that you and I share this love of street epistemology of the what do you believe, why do you
Yeah.
believe it, can you defend it? I don't want to put
Mhm.
you on a spot of defending
Mhm.
something, but in
Yeah.
the last few years, I've read The Great Controversy at least 6 times.
Mhm.
I've read chapter 39 and 40
Yeah.
scores
Yeah.
10, 20 times
Yeah.
or more. I've
Mhm.
really tried to work out what it is the traditional Adventists believe at key points of
Mhm.
their teachings.
Mhm.
And So one point I've come to, I'm pretty sure I've got a really good handle on what the traditional Adventist believes.
Okay.
Not so I can now counter it.
Yeah.
You'll watch me doing shows where I'm,
Yeah.
having a go at Ellen White and I'm having a go at this. I'm not trying to say that I'm not opposing different forms of Adventism at all, but I see the whole point of today's discussion that I see these two groups fighting each other, and I think, come on, you guys could be more effective if you realized you were oil and water, chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
But there's one area that I've had nobody fully unpack for me. I've heard Dennis Priebe explain it the best, and it's the way I think it is, but I'm interested in your thought. So the way I'll say the way Dennis Priebe teaches it, and then I'll come to the point where there's the two traditional Adventists have two different views, which I would love your view on. So I'm not challenging your view. I just want to know what you believe of these two things, because I've had lots of traditional Adventists have this conversation, and I've realized that they don't agree on it. And even Ellen White seems to support both of these beliefs. So let me take you to the end of time. We're in the time of trouble. The Sunday law has already been imposed. People are running to the hills. Some people are being thrown in jail. Some people are, successfully hiding. Some people have given up and no longer keep the Sabbath and all of this kind of stuff. And the world is wars and there's all sorts of stuff going on. And Ellen White teaches very clearly, Adventism teaches this very clearly, that there will come a time just before Jesus returns where the whole point of Adventism is revealed and put to the test. And there is a moment where probation closes. And as probation closes, in the time of trouble, the Lord hasn't returned. Probation closing isn't the return. It's just the closing of probation. At that point, there's righteous chosen and there's the unrighteous. And neither group knows that they are righteous or unrighteous. At that point, Jesus has defended those who have become righteous. He has defended them to God. God accepts them as being righteous. And then Jesus removes his intercessory mediation. Now, this is my point. This is where I'm getting to. And it's really just for my interest. I don't think everyone's glazing over right now. Their eyes are glazing over. But I love this stuff. And I'm trying to nut it out. And I've dug deep. So at this point, these people must stand without an intercessor to prove Satan's claim that they can't keep the commandments unless Jesus is there like a puppeteer. So Jesus has to be removed as an intercessor and a mediator. He has already mediated. They are righteous. They don't know it yet. But they have to be in this situation to prove that they will continue to keep the commandments, to keep the Sabbath, to prove to the angels, to prove to the other planets watching on that this group of people can, in fact, keep the commandments as Jesus did in his life. This is the thing. At that point, it lasts for a few days, a few weeks, maybe a month or two. Ellen White says it's a short amount of time. Then Jesus returns. And those who have kept the commandments during that time go to heaven. Okay, so Dennis Priebe says that at that time, they have received the seal, but they are not sealed. So it is important to note that they could still fail. If you remove the ability to fail, you actually aren't proving Satan's
Yeah.
claim.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he says.
Okay.
And I agree with that.
Mhm.
Ellen White's got two things to say on it.
Mhm.
Traditional Adventists have got two things to say on it. I view it as they've chosen the last team for the finals,
Mhm.
and they're in the team, but now they've got to do one last game to test, but they could still fail.
Mhm.
What do you believe there? Some Adventists say, some traditional Adventists say, no, they cannot fail at that point.
Okay.
And they will then, so they can still have an assurance without a mediator. And others say, no, they can fail, or what's the whole point of proving Satan's claim? And Ellen White is, I can't conclusively find her weighing in on it. There's information on both sides.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts? That's a big get to
Yeah.
on that. But I'm fascinated in that as to what the traditional Adventist really believes, because yeah.
It's not a point that I've really dug deep into, and I'll probably study this a lot more after this conversation. But I have read The Great Controversy a number of times. It's one of my favorite books, just because of the history in it. I love it. And but yeah, from what I take that teaching to be, is that God's people do have the still the ability to sin. That's not taken away, and they can still sin.
Yeah.
Whether or not they will sin is a different question. So maybe they won't sin, but they can sin. That's sort of
Yeah.
how I see it. But is it done without the power of the Holy Spirit, without without Christ's righteousness? I don't believe so. I don't think we're divorced from Christ's indwelling Spirit. I think that Ellen White is talking about that the sealing that comes before the plagues, before that time of trouble, is so that we are preserved through that time. Now, maybe his stopped his mediatorial work where he's intercessing for ongoing sins and things like that. He stops that. That doesn't mean that he abandons ship and he leaves his church without his Holy Spirit to preserve them and to keep them. So I think that there is a difference there. I don't think Christ has to be mediating for his people in order to preserve them and be still giving them the power to have victory. And I think that's probably where I land on things. I could be wrong. That's probably maybe not what the traditional Adventists believe
No,
or teach.
I'm pretty sure that is what the traditional Adventist teaches. Like the Ellen White, while she says that Jesus leaves his intercessory role, she says the Holy Spirit is still there.
Yeah, I think that
The angels,
often gets
the angels
framed.
are still there.
I think that sometimes gets framed that the 144,000 are just, gritting their teeth and doing it by themselves to hang in there and making sure that, we prove Satan wrong in our own. I don't think that's what maybe some traditional Adventists believe that. I don't know how they arrive at that conclusion. But what I believe is that I do believe that the Holy Spirit is going to be indwelling his church in that period of time and will be continuing to uh, preserve them in that period, because from what you read from the Revelation and early writings and things like that, there's still an attack out on God's people at that time. She frames it, the death decree goes out, things like that. So there's still an opportunity for people to relinquish their faith and to cave in, but they don't. So there's still an opportunity that they will deny Christ and that, so they still can sin in that sense, but they will have the Holy Spirit. And I think the problem with a lot of the two gospels is that the two polarizing views of the legalism, and then you've got the other side, the antinomianism. I think both of them divorce the gospel from the promises of God. And I think that's a big error. Like the people that are the legalistic style, that no, I've got to white knuckle it, I've got to grit my teeth, I've just got to work harder, et cetera, to be more obedient. They have no peace because they are divorcing the gospel from the promises. And then the other side I see is that they believe the gospel is just Jesus is going to save you without those promises that God says he's going to bring you into harmony with his law. So both of them, I feel, is there's an error in both where they're not actually fully trusting what God has actually promised to do for his people. That's just how I
Yeah,
see it.
and I'm like you. I'm going to continue looking into that, but I'm 90% convinced, as you say, that there has to be the possibility of failure for
Mm.
some.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you view it collectively, that collectively, though some will fail, the ultimate victory
Mm.
it goes to those who have substantiated what what the whole point of Adventism is, that
Yeah.
there will be a people that do stand to the end. So it will stand and it will be victorious,
Mm.
though you have to have a, an, a potential, a possibility for some to fail, and maybe some will. But I think we've got to step back from the individual selfish look at it and
Yeah.
go as a group, it will succeed.
Yeah.
So while some of the team might fall and get a knee injury and be taken off the field,
Yeah.
the team itself is going to win and
I
be
think that's
victorious.
probably where we go back to the changes in questions on doctrine on the nature of Christ,
100%. That's a big one.
because we see Jesus with the traditional Adventists, the ones that promote last generation theology, is what you're sort of expounding on. What is in the great controversy there, believe that Christ could fail, and he had a sinful nature. And most Adventists don't even believe that. Even the traditional Adventists push back on Christ having a sinful nature, even though Ellen White clearly says it multiple times, over
Mm,
40 times
mm,
she says it.
mm.
So, because we think that if my nature is sinful, I am a sinner, that's all I can ever be. The promises of God that says that I can bring you and I can give you a new heart, I can make you obedient to my law, those promises, from what I see, are either reframed, reworked, or ignored.
Yeah,
So if Christ could fail, then I think that's a parallel or a type of what the 144,000 do, because they are looking at Jesus as the example, you
right.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think
And so if you think that Christ could never fail, could not sin, and he's just walking the earth just to do, just to preach the gospel, tell everyone that the Father, loves them and they can be in a relationship with him, but he could never be tempted or sin or fall or anything like that, then you've got a different view of what those Adventists in the 144,000 believe or see.
yeah, and that change in the questions on doctrine
Mm.
that they convinced Walter Martin was what
Mm.
they had always believed
Yeah,
was a bit deceptive.
it
And
was.
and Walter Martin went to his grave going, "Oh, was I tricked? Was I?
Mm. Yeah,
But no, by then no one would really get together with him and have a discussion anymore.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
he spent a lot of his time quite frustrated. And in the early 80s, I mean, that interview with Bill Johnson on the John Ankerberg show is mind blowing, where you
Yes,
realise
yeah. I
that
saw all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Bill Johnson on my show, season 2, episode 1, when I was
Mm.
about to pack in the whole SDAQ&A podcast that had been going for a few years on and off. A show would come out every now and again.
Mm.
And I was about to close it. And I asked him that question, how confident are you that something supernatural happened
Mm.
October 22, 1844? And I
Yeah.
expected him to go, I'm very confident. That's what I expected.
Mm.
And there's this pause. Ugh. Peter, I don't know if I can answer that question. And I
Mm.
thought, bing,
Yeah.
I know what
I
I'm going
think
to
I
do
actually
for the
saw
next
that
5
interview
years.
with you and him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It was so powerful to
Yeah.
me. It's why I'm still doing
Mm.
3 shows a week 5 years later,
Yeah.
because I thought there is something to see here.
Yeah.
Y- y-
And
you-
I think that
You know,
Yeah.
and I said
I
to him
think
later in
we've
the program,
yeah.
can you not believe in 1844 and still be
Mm.
an Adventist? And he was yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that that's probably something that's been a really, I guess, unraveled Adventism, like what Ron Kelly had to say last week,
Yeah.
is that this need that Adventists have to be accepted by the evangelical world. I think that's been the demise of a lot of our doctrines and a lot of the clarity of our doctrines, because we
Yeah.
don't want to put our neck out too far and look too weird to the
Yeah.
other to the other Christians there, because apparently we need to reach them. And the way we reach them is we try to trick them in thinking that we believe exactly the same things they do, and we don't. We don't.
Exactly. Wow.
And
That's so
so
good.
I want to, but some people are going to hate me that I said that, but that's just the truth.
The truth.
And it's like I want to be able to clearly talk about, what message we have to the Christian world and the world at large. We can't do that by pretending that we believe the same things as they do, because we don't. There are probably some things that we overlap on, like the Trinity and the Bible. There's the Word of God and lots of things that we probably have harmony on. But the gospel, at its foundation, we do have a different one. Well, the
Yeah.
teachings that Wagner and Jones had and Ellen White supported and said that that's what she was attempting to teach for the last 50 years of her ministry, that message is definitely different to the gospel that is being taught in evangelical world. And our attempt to try and be non-cultish and go, hey, we're just like you guys and please accept us, like, I don't know what thinking is behind that. I was actually watching a podcast the other day because I follow this guy that's in America. His actually ministry is to reach Muslims, but for some reason Adventists watch him, and he got talking to Adventists, and this is definitely out of his wheelhouse, but he actually got an Adventist onto his podcast to actually have a discussion about the Sabbath. And I was so, well, I guess I was cringing most of the time, because this Adventist unfortunately just could not defend what he believed, and
Yeah.
this guy was pulling him apart with questions,
Yeah.
and he just couldn't do it. And it was such a bad look on Adventism. I'm like, I can't believe
Uh,
that we are publicly doing this. But the one thing that really frustrated me, or really I guess troubled me, is probably the better word, is that how offended the Adventists got when the when the Christian, the other Christian guy, clearly said to him, I don't think you're a Christian. And how offended he got. I'm like, I would never be offended if someone told me that I don't believe you're a Christian, Samuel, because you believe Ellen White was a prophet, because you believe Michael was the archangel. Like, if someone says that to me, it doesn't affect me whatsoever.
no.
It has no bearing of what they believe of me. But some people get so hung up on I hope this person thinks I'm a Christian. I'm like, I know I'm a Christian from my personal experience and my study and my connection with Christ, not from what this person says about me.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that dynamic is that people need to be accepted as a true Christian. Like, who defines who a true Christian is? Like, do we think that they're defining what true Christianity
Yeah.
is out there? So why do we care if they think that we're a cult? Like, I don't
Yeah.
think we are, but some people will think that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we can't control that. All I wanted to say is, look, this is what we believe. This is why we believe it. Here's the evidence. Take it or leave it. If you see that there's truth in it, then hey, great. If you don't, hey, I've done what my obligation is, and that's to share with you what I actually believe, not trying to, you know, wishy-washy this and
Yeah. Yeah.
dilute it and try and
Yeah.
hook you in a little bit and go, look, I believe exactly what you believe in, but
Yeah.
no, it's just the Sabbath is different, and then hook you in later, and then you're in for a
Yeah.
couple of years and you've got roots in the church, and then you start to believe, oh, these guys
What's
actually,
going on? It's
yeah,
very disingenuous.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not what I'm about. That's why I
Yeah.
couldn't be probably a pastor, and I could never be a politician or in leadership in the church, because I'm just so, this is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think what that reveals about you is a healthy self-identity, and there's a lot of people wanting in the chat, and I'm just not ignoring it in a mean way, but there's just, I don't want to get into questions where you're defending your faith. I think we've had a really great conversation today. We've
Mm,
identified a really important issue. We've
Yeah.
hopefully created some dialogue, and I
Yeah.
would love to get you back one day and say, okay, audience, go for it. Let's put Samuel under the
Feet to the
spotlight,
fire.
and
Yeah.
let's ask some hard questions. Let's
Yeah.
do that. I'd love to
Yeah.
do that maybe next
And
holidays.
And I like that. I like that engagement, because what it does is some people ask me questions that I've never thought about before. And that's fantastic, because then
Mm.
I can go and study it, and I can go, hey, you know what? I haven't even thought about that before, but
Mm.
I do want to get to the bottom of that. That's what fruitful discussion does, and
Yeah.
that's what I want to promote and support. And that's why I came here today, is to try and get the conversation going, get the ball, you
Yeah.
know, turning, get some people into the
Exactly.
conversation. Let's
Yes.
get clarity on
Yep.
both sides. Let's
Yep.
talk, you know.
Let's do it. And
Yeah.
one of the things I've discovered from in some ways, an experiment of talking every side of Adventism possible, and literally I have offended and triggered every single kind of Adventist there is.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed as a byproduct is my own self-identity is very
Mm,
strong. I'm not talking
mm,
about a
mm.
self-centered,
Yeah,
egocentric
yeah,
identity. I
yeah.
I literally I welcome criticism.
Mm,
I
mm,
enjoy hearing from a wide variety of people's views. I love
mm.
going, well, what do you believe? Can you defend it? Here's a couple of
Yeah,
hard questions for you.
yeah, yeah.
And if you're an Adventist watching now of any kind,
Mm,
and formers as well,
mhm,
and you feel that you are being attacked,
mm.
I would suggest that you need to have a little look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep,
Because you
yep.
aren't being attacked. This is
Mm,
just
mm.
some
Yeah.
challenging questions.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think it's probably a connection, probably a combination of my upbringing, my work environment that I had to deal with for 20 years while I was in hospitality, and then finally my personal study that's enabled me to get to a position where I don't get offended if people question me, if
mm,
people disagree with me.
mm,
Doesn't matter. I've been in an environment like my work environment. I'm a chef, and you're constantly under scrutiny, particularly
yeah,
the high-end restaurants that I've worked at.
yeah,
You're constantly, for 18 hours a day, you're told that,
yeah,
you need to do better. That's not good enough. You need to hurry up and do this. You're not doing this right.
yeah,
You're constantly under scrutiny all day, every
yeah,
day, and they don't, beat around the bush with it. They don't
yeah.
sugarcoat anything.
No way.
They're yelling at you
I've watched
directly.
cooking
Like,
shows,
yes, this is what you need to do. You're not doing it. Hurry up. Like, that's
Gordon
it.
Ramsay
Yeah.
style.
That's right. I was actually
Yeah.
trained. I was under one of Gordon Ramsay's apprentice chefs
Wow.
that trained under him. And yes, they are like that. And this is
Yeah.
what I've been exposed to. And I know not everyone has that experience,
No.
but that's enabled me to get into a position where I believe what I believe for good reasons, I think. But that's why I'm happy to have a discussion and
Yeah.
and be questioned on it. And probably there's people in the chat that are going to be able to come up with questions that I've never even studied or thought about. And I'm happy
Yeah.
to say, look, I don't even know about that.
Yeah.
But the things that I have studied and the things that I have got answers for, I'm happy to say, look, this is what I believe and why I believe it, and this is how I
Yeah.
came to the conclusion.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Look, I agree. Fantastic. And I think it's time for the liberal progressives to look at being less soft. And you can do that here on the show. So if
mm,
I've invited lots of progressives to come on. I get a lot of progressives on the program.
mm,
I'm so glad I've had a lot of the academics on as well. They've been
yeah,
gold. So look, thanks so much for our discussion today, Samuel. It was I knew it was going to be a good one. I knew it was an important one, but it's even been better than I could have imagined. And Sue Burge writes, listening to SDA Q&A is so entertaining and educational. A big thank you.
great.
Uh,
Yeah, it's been
so
good.
thank you so much. And just a quick plug for tomorrow, everybody. I will be on with Rodrigo Custodio and hopefully a couple of other people as well to talk about the general conference. You might want to tune in, Samuel, if you want to learn a bit more about the
Yeah, yeah,
politics and
yeah.
stuff. And those watching, just a quick way to help me if you're wanting to do it without financial support, which is totally fine. It's just click like and subscribe. And also, as soon as you've watched this show, just click another SDA Q&A show and just watch for 3 minutes. That really boosts the algorithms and gets the program out to more eyes and ears. And if you would like to support what I'm doing, it's just paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music, because I used to be all about the music and now I'm all about the interviews.
Mm.
Things changed after lockdown in lots of ways for a lot of people.
Mm.
Well, Samuel, until next time, thank you again for chatting today. And I'm can't wait to bump into you again. Are you still doing some of the food stuff with, is it Sitter?
Yeah, Jared.
With Jared
He's
Martin?
out at the Hunter Valley Gardens at the moment.
Okay.
But yeah, he's still doing that. Help where I can. Haven't since I've been full-time working now teaching this year, so I haven't had much
Yeah.
time. This is my first full year teaching, so it's been full on for me. So I've
I
had a lot of
bet.
time
Yeah.
to do the food stuff. But when the dust settles on this first year, I'll get back out there.
Yeah.
In the
That's
food
awesome.
trailer business again. So
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you
yeah.
again, Samuel. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you all again tomorrow. See you later.
All right, see you.